Hello, friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Before we take you to your favorite Sports History Network show, just want to tell you a little bit about some merch that you can pick up that represents your favorite SHN podcast. So far, there's t-shirts, coffee mugs, and even books from some of the authors that do podcasts right here on SHN. Who could buy something better than that, than have the history right from the gentleman that you hear talking about it? But we also are adding things each and every day. And where's that store, may you ask? Well, it's at SportsHistoryNetwork.com. Up at the top, there is the SHN merch button. Click on that. It'll take you right to the store, and you can be representing your favorite podcast and show the world that, hey, on the swag that I'm using, it's the headquarters of sports yesteryear, Sports History Network, and my favorite podcaster, the Sports History Network store. Shop there today.
Do you want to start a podcast? I know I did, and you're listening to it thanks to the help of Anchor. Download the Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. It's totally free and has everything you need in a podcast in one place. You can record, edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, and distribute it to listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Everything you need all in one place, completely free. What's stopping you? Go get Anchor.
How did one of the biggest wars in the world give us a moment in time where men put down their weapons and enjoyed the fellowship of man rather than war? All it took was a little bit of Christmas spirit for everyone to put down their weapons and enjoy time together. That is what happened on Christmas 1914. The first Christmas of World War I.
Welcome to the Sports Moments Podcast, where every sports moment deserves its replay. I'm your host, Ethan Reese, your sports historian and giant goofball, which best describes this show, sports history and goofballness thrown in there. This is not a Dateline only facts podcast. I will joke around, tell the most factually accurate story I can, but have a good time doing it. So now let's sit back and jump into the sports time machine.
Let's get into the Christmas truce of World War I in 1914, the football game, as everyone refers it to. And we'll jump into how it all happened, what led to it. Obviously, we'll overview World War I, how it started, how we ended up to this point, as a means to understand how we got to, the football match and the truce that happened on Christmas. Less to know about history. So I'm not going to go in too much detail. We are a sports focused podcast, but we are history focused as well. And World War I was a big historical moment, and it gave us this moment in history where we put down our weapons and enjoyed time together. And that's really what it was. And we'll jump into how this match what was it? What happened with it? Was it as big as everyone thought it was? And so we'll get into all that. But first, let's just jump into how World War I all happened. So what happened was, this was known as the Great War. This was the first big war that featured, more than just, one or two countries like getting up against another. It was really multiple countries going against multiple countries. And this all started with the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand of Australia. Oh my goodness, not Australia, Austria. It's Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria. His murder catapulted war across Europe. Now, at this time, everyone was on edge. It wasn't going to take very much. This is not, a guy that was beloved as a a figurehead of a state. It wasn't that. It was just kind of everyone was on edge a little bit. Everyone's kind of growing their military power, and lines in Europe were changing. Border lines, they were changing at the time too, and it kind of caused some issues as well. And so this war lasted, 4 years almost, from 1914 to 1918. And the conflict between Germany, Austria/Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire, those were the main central powers, fought against Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, Romania, Japan, and later on the United States. So thanks to new military technologies, this was the war that was known as the trench warfare. And this was something that was done as just a means to an end. And we'll jump into a little bit more why they did this trench warfare compared to traditional warfares, because we were evolving from the 1776 kind of warfare we think of with Britain, and more modern warfare as we develop more technologies and more ways to lose less casualties and use our technology to help win a war. But this was a big war. Eventually the Allied powers won the victory, and more than 16 million people, soldiers and civilians, they fought this on European land, where there was a lot of people. We don't have these numbers today, as we're more targeted, but civilians is part of war, and this was a big one. And understand too, our population of the world was much less back then, so we didn't have as many people to lose. It was a huge percentage of people to lose. So let's jump into who was the Archduke Franz Ferdinand and what caused this tension. So first off, Franz Ferdinand, best known for his song on Rock Band. It was very popular back in the day. Her Guitar Hero, the song that goes do 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 do, take me out, boop 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 boop. Yeah, that's a good song, Take Me Out by Franz Ferdinand. And that was not this Franz Ferdinand. No. That was a band that took their name a little bit from this guy. But this was a guy back in 1800s, and what Archduke meant was he was the next in line to take the throne. They still had a monarchy in Austria-Hungary at the time, and he was the next in line. That's why he was the figurehead. There was just tension brewing at this time, like I said, in the Balkan region, for years before the war broke out. So it was just basically a powder keg. It was about to pop, It wasn't just this one thing. It's okay, we're dropping everything. We got to do something. This guy was important. It wasn't necessarily that. It was just they were looking for something, and this was the thing that happened, And there was so many things of was it actually? Who was it actually? Was it conspiracy? There's always conspiracy theories of was this just one place trying to do it, trying to cause a war. So everything was going, tensions were building, and then the spark that ignited the war struck in Sarajevo, Bosnia. Sorry for my pronunciation. I am not Austrian. I do not know all these words. So he was shot along with his wife Sophia. So it wasn't just him. It was his wife too. The heiress, as you would say, by the Serbian nationalist Gavrilo Principi on June 28, 1914. Now Principi and other nationalists were struggling to end the Austrian-Hungarian rule over Bosnia and Herzegovina. Wow, please forgive me for all my words. I'll stop apologizing now. I'm going to mess up some of these places. Obviously, some of these places aren't around anymore, so you don't hear them as much. So they wanted to end this monarchy rule. They wanted it to be more democracy. So the assassination of Ferdinand set off a rapid escalation chain of events. Austria-Hungary, like many of the countries around the world, blamed the Serbian government for the attack and hoped to use this incident to justify settling the question of Serbian nationalism for once and all. So, that's where the conspiracy, they think it was the actual Serbian government instead of just like this terrorist organization. They thought they paid for this and all that. That's kind of where they kind of took this one thing that happened and forced it to be more than it was. Maybe. We don't know. But because mighty Russia supported Serbia, Austria-Hungary waited to declare war until its leaders received assurance from the German leader Wilhelm II that Germany would support their cause. Austria-Hungary leaders feared that Russian intervention would involve Russia ally France and possibly Great Britain as well. So they wanted to be sure they had people backing them before they declared war. I mean, it makes sense. You're this kind of smaller country of Austria, Russia becoming a huge power, Great Britain already a power, France a power. You don't want to go against them unless you have someone else backing you too. So on July 5th, Wilhelm secretly pledged his support, giving Austria-Hungary a so-called carte blanche, or a blank check, and assured the German backing in the cause of war. The dual monarchy of Austria-Hungary then sent an ultimatum to Serbia. As such, harsh terms as it makes almost impossible to accept. They basically were like, hey, you take this, or we're going to battle you. They basically wanted the battle. They wanted the war. At this point, everyone wanted to fight. Ready? Fight! They wanted to fight, and they didn't really care. They wanted to go through it diplomatically. Air quotes. They wanted to go through it diplomatically, but they didn't really care. They just wanted to get this fight and show that they were going to win this. So that's kind of where it all began, and so really they convinced that Austria-Hungary was ready for war. Then Serbian governments ordered that Serbian army to mobilize and appeal to Russia for assistance. On July 28th, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, and tense peace between Europe's great powers quickly collapsed. And within a week, Russia, Belgium, France, Great Britain, and Serbia had lined up against Austria and Germany, and World War I had begun. First off, so that's where it all began. It's kind of a brief overview. There's way more intelligent people and people that love the just history of war that can dive into it. Just a basic overview so we can jump in the truths of the football game and everything that happened. But just remember, this was a big war. This was a first moment, and it's just hard to believe you can just go against, you have 5 countries, big countries, going against Austria and Germany. That's crazy to begin with. And they didn't care. They just really wanted to fight. So let's get into the truce of Christmas. Now, remember, this is 1914. This is when the war began. The war began in July. The end of July, beginning of August. And Christmas time was, fast approaching. And so it was only a few months after. And so at the time, you had a lot of people thinking, this isn't going to last very long. You have 5 powers going against these 2. Normally, 5 on 2, the five's going to win pretty easily, pretty quickly, and people thought the war was going to end quickly. Not last 4 years. They thought, well, this will end really quickly, and we'll get this figured out. We won't have to fight for very long. That did not happen. It lasted a lot longer. So it lasted to Christmas. People thought it'd be over by Christmas, but it didn't. It lasted, and it's because of the trench warfare. If you don't know what trench warfare was, they dug these ditches basically to battle. And what really started was they were doing the normal battle, like marching in lines, facing off against each other. The powers trying to take on the little Austrian and Germany brethren, trying to take them down. They tried to overpower them, and then what happened? People were like ducked down, try to hide. As you're getting shot at, you dig a hole with what you have, and you hide there. And what basically all these guys connected their holes, and they just dug out and dug out and dug out, and they realized we're more protected if we're here. They were like 30 yards away sometimes at the closest. Sometimes it was a little farther, 100 yards or so, but like it was not very far from each other, of battling each other. And you had these new equipments, machine guns, tanks were later introduced. You had air was introduced into this time, and there's so many more technologies going into it. You want to protect yourself more than before, when you just had a guy with a gun who could shoot one gun at a time. One bullet, like bang. Okay, now I can hide a little bit. Bang. This was, the machine guns that were not accurate, but it's a little more scary at the time. And you gotta remember too that this time, a lot of these soldiers were professional soldiers, and what I mean by that is they got into being a soldier either through requirements of their government or to make money. That was their job. They were a soldier. They went into it to be a soldier. This is something we kind of forget about, because a lot of times we think of these World War Wars where you're like, I'm going in this to battle, you always think of World War II, the Nazis. I'm going to go battle the Nazis. But that mentality was there in World War I, where you're going to go battle this other country, but they weren't on the front lines yet. You had to go through basic training and get ready to go, or their version of basic training, or however long it was. So a lot of the fighting in 1914 was, professional soldiers who didn't necessarily have beef with these people. Eventually that beef grows as you become more country versed. A lot of it, just think about if your boss comes to you, says, "Hey Peter, how you doing? I'm gonna need you to come in on Saturday." No, you don't want to do it, but you do it because it's your job. And think of it like that. Hey Peter, I'm gonna have to need you to go kill some Germans over there. Yeah. That's very difficult to do. And you can be opposed to it. You're opposed to it, but it's your job, so you do it. But you just do it to, like, one, protect yourself. You don't want to die as one reason, obviously, but you also do it because it's your job, and you want to keep your job and be at least a decent soldier. So remember that these were just professional soldiers. They didn't have the hatred right away for these people. They were just doing their job, going where they were needed, basically. So that's kind of how they kind of, like, to think of it as a different way of, like, that's why they were able to create this truce. And truces happened, a lot during the battles. Because they had these trenches, there were bodies in between the trenches, and they would call a truce every now and then, maybe once a week or so, and say, "Truce, truce, truce, let us go pick up our dead bodies." That's mainly what it was. Those were truces were mainly to focus on clearing the battlefield, being respectful to the lives that were lost. And again, these were professional soldiers. This was more common because this is just how the rules of battle kind of were at the time. So it's very, very much a work-like environment. I know there was killing, and honestly, if you killed someone's best friends, you have work friends, if they killed your friend, that's going to be a little bit harder to have this truce. But from what it seems like, it didn't really, the truces were always honored, or mostly always honored, and to call a truce was actually pretty scary, because you had to come up from the hole and talk across the way, or even walk across the way, waving a white flag or something like that, and hope that no one shot you on accident. I would be petrified. I'm not going. No. They're shooting at people the moment they step up. Yeah, you'll have a flag. Yeah. I'm going to trust a guy that can't see. I don't know if he can see. I don't know what he can do. I don't even know how he's talking or what he's feeling like. He may be just mad at the world and can just shoot at any time. Yeah, you'll be fine. That's how it was. Oh, I would have hated. It would just. I would hate war. I love our veterans. I love all veterans for what they do and what they provide for our country. But I would be terrible at it. I would be a scaredy cat. I'm a scaredy cat even when I play Call of Duty. I'm that guy hiding oh, don't hurt me. Just hiding in the corner, with a maybe sniper rifle or something. Don't come here. I'm going to just stay away. Even in a video game. Come on. I'm a pansy. I am a pansy. I'm not, and I don't claim to be anything to the contrary. I am a pansy. So, but I love veterans. My hat's off to you. Both my grandfathers were veterans and fought in wars, and I love those guys, and I love anyone that puts their life on the line for us, because you were, and especially in this. Anytime you just popped up out of the hole, you had a chance of passing. Luckily, even though with the new technologies of shooting guns faster, you shot the gun faster, but you didn't aim better always. So there was that aspect as well. But also in that aspect, you had no idea when there was going to be fire coming through or anything like that. So truces were common. They happened a lot. And you get more towards these fights and get more towards Christmas, and they've been in the trenches. They've been in the trenches for months, and you know what the trenches were like? Terrible. These were makeshift trenches. They weren't planned. As I said, one guy would dig a hole, and the next guy near him dug a hole, and they just connected their holes. If you look at the ways of the trenches, they kind of can have an outline, and they are zigzag, 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 whoop, whoop, whoop. It looks like someone with kind of the shakes or something just went it is. No continuity. Eventually they got a little bit better, but it's a very zigzaggy, no kind of rhyme to it. So there'd be cave-ins, there would be all these different things that would happen, mud up to your knees, so uncomfortable. And they would spend most of their time just fortifying these trenches so that you could walk through them and be dry. You are 6, 8, 10 feet below ground level. That's not usually sustainable on a normal thing. Normally, when you're digging a hole like that, you're going to fill it with water to make a pond. You're not going to, live there. So trench life was terrible. Everyone of the soldiers that talks about trench life, it was an awful, awful mess. You barely got clean. You were always wet. You were all in just imagine always being wet. It makes my body tingle. Just being always wet. You just want to be dry. You just want to get out. You want to go into no man's land between the trenches. You want to go in there, but you'll die. And so it's just how are you going to do that? And so just remember that life was rough. And so what happened was on Christmas Eve actually is when the Christmas festivities happened. Remember, both of these countries, or many of these countries, had been indoctrinated with Christianity, faith, with a lot of Catholicism, and so it wasn't many of these soldiers were Catholic. So just remember that as we jump into why, you know, why were so many of these people, celebrating Christmas? And it was, you know, Catholicism and Christianity had just grown and grown and grown in Europe. Huge, and it had grown across the world, actually. At this time, it was huge. And there wasn't a whole lot of other regions that kind of believe. India wasn't involved at the time, or China or anything like that. So, Hindu or Islam wasn't as represented in this war. So just remember that too. So it was mainly Christmas at this time.
So on Christmas Eve in 1914, the German troops were starting to hear something that they hadn't heard before. So they listened very intently, and they hear, Starlight Night, Heilig Nacht, alles Land in Schwammflat, nur das starre, herzliche Paar, Heilig Nacht, Schlag den Hamstring Ruhe, schlag alles Ruhe. And so, to not be outdone, the German troops came back with their own version. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round your virgin holy child. Oh, the infant so tender and mild, sleep in heavenly peace, sleep in heavenly peace. And what this started was an epic back and forth battle between the two sides in a singing competition like no one had seen before. And eventually, over time, they came back with a song that no one really knew, but they all knew all the words. And out of nowhere, the British came to the Germans with this song of hope. And it went a little bit like, here's a holiday message going out to the world. Please listen up, our white flags are unfurled. What we gotta do to get through to you, to play nice with each other. Don't make me separate you, no hesitate, sisters and brothers. It seems like everybody needs a little time out. Bullies running loose, we're calling a truce, the world of doubt. Grown-ups are lying while babies are crying. We're all picking sides, causing divide, losing our pride. Here's all we're asking you, please don't bomb us this holiday. It's just not nice to bomb people. Don't fight, it's impolite, it ain't right. Not tonight, not on the holiday. Okay, they did not sing that song. If you know who the Dan Band is, that is one of their holiday songs. You probably remember them from old school. They're that band that sings Total Eclipse of the Heart at the wedding reception. But yeah, that song just seems so fitting, calling for a truce on holiday. So I had to throw that in there. But yeah, that is actually what happened. They did go back and forth, with their carols going back and forth, and that kind of what started the truce, because they could also see, like, they were starting to put out decorations. There was Christmas trees, candles. They weren't sure what they were seeing until they started to hear this music. They're like, oh, it's Christmas, and let's do something about this. And so that's what it started, was with the carols and singing going back and forth with each other. So after the Christmas Eve at night, as the light began to come up and dawn shone over the battlefield, the German soldiers started to emerge out of their trenches and approach the Allies as waving for a truce in no man's land. And they were saying Merry Christmas. The Germans at the time were more bilingual than the British, so they were, speaking English more than the British were speaking German. So they were offering this Merry Christmas to them in their native tongue. And at first, the Allied soldiers thought this was a trick. I mean, this obviously seems like, are you just trying to lure me out? Are you a creepy guy in a van with candy? I love candy, but you have a van and a mustache. Okay, candy. But yeah, they thought it might have been a trick. And so but the Germans were unarmed, and they were like, well, I mean, they're not, the worst they could have is concealed, maybe knives or something, but like it seemed genuine, and they were able to come out into no man's land and converse with these people. And remember, these were professional soldiers. The amount of hostility towards the other country in a war that we generally think of is not happened yet. These guys are doing their job. At this point in time, since they were doing trench warfare, you weren't so much going face to face with somebody. It was one of the first times when you're not face to face with your enemy. So being able to converse and have that time with your technical enemy wasn't as unusual as we might think. So they came out, they started to share things, exchange presents. Yes, like troops were getting, lighters and cigarettes and things from home, and they would actually exchange them with gifts with people from the other side. That's crazy. Like, we're in a battle, I might kill you tomorrow, but here's a gift. Like, that is just hard to believe and hard to think about in our heads as we think about war. But also remember, these were, professionals. They were like, I look at it as, professional businessmen. They might hate each other. They might battle each other in competition for business. But a lot of times they come together and help in certain ways too, for the good of men or for the good of, country or whatever it is. They work together sometimes too. It's not, business is not always competition. And war, obviously in this case, wasn't always war. So they also had some trees, some Christmas trees that they lined their trenches with candles in jars. The story of the soccer match comes in, and really, I hate to break it to you, there's not a whole lot of evidence of these soccer matches. Now, this isn't an isolated incident. Like, this was across the large trench warfare, which spanned a lot of places, and like this was mainly between the German and the British areas. French and German were actually more at odds way before the war, so there was more animosity. So they didn't usually have this in most of those areas. It was mainly between the British and the German because they didn't have that continuous combative war. But they don't have a whole lot of evidence that this soccer match really happened. There's some things that called it a kickabout, which is, when you just go with your friends and kick the ball around, or like if you're playing basketball, if you don't play soccer very much, just shoot hoops with your friends. You're not really playing a game so much. You're just kind of enjoying the company of each other. That's really what it was for the most part, we think. I highly doubt, though, that they didn't play a game. Like, it would have been simple enough to, set up makeshift goals and just kind of compete with each other. It wasn't a full-out game. And I think that's what people always think about. It was like, okay, we're going to take you guys on today. Like that it was mainly for this. They always bring up the soccer match, the football match, as in Europe, as they say. And it's not something that like really, they don't say that there wasn't soccer. Okay, they don't say that there wasn't, all the historians. They just say it wasn't a big game or it wasn't a big moment for them. And that is something that I think like we need to remember. Sometimes history, and that's why I wanted to dive into this too, because sometimes history isn't what it seems. You get this misconceived notions that it's going to be something crazy, and history like this is so crazy. They played soccer and everything like that, all while having war, and it's like kind of. So, and sometimes history is disappointing, and actually a lot of times it can be disappointing when you dive into the deep packs of it. It can be very kind of disappointing that, man, I thought it was going to be so much cooler. And I hate to break it to you, it may not have been that cool. Really, these guys were just happy to get out of the trenches. And it like that was the main thing. Like they had a day where they could just get out of their mud pit and just walk around and not be so wet, not have to change their socks every hour or try to figure out a way to dry themselves at every moment. It would have been cold. There's no doubt it would have been cold. These aren't warm climate places, but it was really just the opportunity and showing that war wasn't everything to these guys. This was a job. They were like getting the benefits. It's like entering the army now or something at our end just to get the benefits for it. You're not really trying to, you don't have a side, you don't like really care, but you know the benefits to being a veteran can really help you in life. And they really can. I've seen it. I have multiple friends that, whether they were in for just 2 years or, they've been in for decades, there are benefits to it. And that's what these guys were doing. They were getting the benefits to it. I'm unsure exactly whether these were requirements. Some countries require every man to be in the military for a certain amount of time. And I don't know whether these could have been some of those. So if you were a guy that didn't care about war, you were just in the military because you were required to be in the military. You're not going to be as ferociously wanting to attack the other people. You're just trying to survive. And I think that's important to remember, that it was more about trying to survive at this time and just than rather to, win the war. These guys thought this war wasn't going to be won by the battle, more about, the government's entities giving up or seceding to each other because or that they were just going to overpower them. The British and French thought they would just overpower the German and Belgium. I don't deny that. I would have thought they would. It's like it is 5-on-2. In mountain playing basketball, we are going to get destroyed 5-on-2. No doubt, we're going to get destroyed. And but maybe there's a possibility. Miracles do happen. Now, it didn't happen in this case. The Allies did beat the Axis, but it was definitely a possibility that they would, have this chance at winning. And, obviously this was the first year. This never happened again. It wasn't something that we ever look back on like, oh, the next year they did this. The next, we just do this every year. It's a Christmas truce. Now, in general, there usually is a Christmas truce. In war, it's kind of unspoken a war thing. But there isn't this exchange, intermingling with your enemy ever again. Ever. A lot of the soldiers that came in after couldn't believe that was done. Higher ranking officials couldn't believe it. And really, they weren't there. The timing of everything, They were just trying to finish out their enlistment. They weren't trying to win the war. So really, it wasn't that big for them to imagine that this wouldn't be a crazy thing to them. But to the war-hardened, people, it was just crazy that these people, it's like, why are these hippies out here doing this? That's what it imagines to me. These hippies out here fraternizing with the enemy. No, they were just people. I think we need to remember that people are people. And sometimes when you're both dealt a crappy hand, you can take solace in that together. And I think that's what this more was. Like, we are stuck in mud, and I just want to get out and enjoy this time with my fellow man. I don't think anyone ever says that. I always hear that. It's like, with my fellow men. It's like, what does that mean, my fellow man? Who are you? Like, we're all different, We might all like sports, but we all know someone that likes our team that we don't want to talk to. I have so many people that's like, dude, you are weird, or you are way too into this. Like, why are you stalking the quarterback? That is weird. Why do you have his underwear? Why are you wearing his underwear? There are some weird things, weird memorabilia people have, and like, if you heard they have that, it's like, no, I'm okay. I don't care that much. Like, I don't want to be like you. I don't want to go to prison for stalking my favorite player, but you have also people that you absolutely love to be around in your fandom as well. That camaraderie comes out, and sometimes you let in those weirdos. It happens. But like, my fellow men, it's just a weird saying because we're not all connected. We're all different, but we do have simple things that do connect us. We all just want to enjoy life. And I think that's the biggest thing that's here. We all wanted to enjoy life. So I am sorry there was not much more in sports involved in this. I thought there would be, diving into this topic and learning more about it. I was like, oh, this is going to be really cool. What about this match? Who won? How did they get it all set up? Everything like that. As I dove into it, I couldn't find anything. It's like, what? That's crazy. And it's amazing how these myths in sports, like, yes, they did play soccer. They kicked the ball around. They may have played a small 3-on-3 match, but it wasn't this big, like, event that they make it seem to be. I know it's not as big as in America, because we weren't involved in the war yet, so we weren't involved in this. It's mainly Britain that this is a huge thing to them. It's like a story that gets told to kids, and love your man and everything that gets told to them at night. But it's not something that we hear about a lot. But over there, it's huge. And to hear that, it's not really what happened. It just can shatter your heart. And sometimes that's going to happen on this show, where we dive into a topic and it's going to be not what we seem. And a lot of times it will be not what we seem, because what we remember and what actually happened don't always match up. And so I think it is important to look back at that and learn from that, because history can be looked at through rose-colored glasses, or it can be looked at through facts. Thank you for listening to the Sports Moments Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's tale. If you did, please give us a review or 5 stars, or wherever you listen to. It helps us grow our community and help tell more engaging stories. You can follow us at Sports Moments Pod on Instagram and Twitter. We post pictures about stories, what happened today in history, different things like that. Just try to be a good sports overall social media company. We still are a new podcast. We're still growing, still working on a few kinks, still working on our website. So if you would like to contact us with a great topic or your view on any episode we've done, you can email us at sportsmomentspodcast@gmail.com. And as we grow, we're looking for great youth sports charities to donate to, because I think it's important to give the youth a chance to learn about sports and bring that love so they can become sports historians as well. So if you have a great charity that you are involved in or you think we should help out, please contact us as well. Again, thank you for listening, and come back next week for another episode of the Sports Moments Podcast, where every sports moment deserves its replay.
At the Sports History Network, we're all about sports yesteryear, and so we're so pleased to introduce you to Row One, an online memorabilia gallery and shop that brings your sports history to life anywhere. The Row One gallery includes over 5,200 gorgeously reproduced prints of team posters, game program covers, game tickets, advertisements, and more in baseball, pro and college football, pro and college basketball, and more. And any gallery item may be printed in a variety of sizes on wood, metal, canvas, acrylic, or poster paper. And in Row One shop, check out the thousands more of unique items with the retro and historical designs dating back to 1876, including t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, phone cases, mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com, ROW1, for access to the full Row One catalog and for gallery prints and gift items, plus get a 15% discount off all prints on the Row One Pictorum Gallery with coupon code SHN15. Follow the link on the show notes.